to this Jersey Chamber of Commerce Hustings for St Helier North. We have some of the candidates that you'll see on the screen in front of you there. I should point out that the two of the seven who are missing from the lineup, and we'll introduce them in a moment, Steve Ayer and Trevor Poynton are the two who are running. From the seven, there will be four elected from this list of seven deputies who put themselves forward in this constituency. And you'll see on your screen we have Max Andrews, Ina Gardner, Phil Romero, and Ted Vibert as well, and Mary Lahegre. Good to have you all with us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'd like to start first of all with just a 2 minute, roughly 2 minutes, on you and your manifesto. I'll go in the order to start with of those I see on my screen. So Max, you'd be the first to start this. So your 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so I decided to stand about 2 years ago. I was very concerned in terms of the poor level of governance that I was seeing. Now, Jersey has a very flexible constitution. Essentially, when we're looking at the legislative governments, the state's assembly, it's quite easy to enact change. However, we've not seen positive change be made. And I have also seen the civil servants also expand in number under the One Gov implementation. And that has obviously been a concern to me. There's been a huge element of fiscal expenditure in this respect, but also our economy as well. I am firmly in favour of embracing a new economy. We have to see economic growth be enhanced. Over consecutive years, Jersey's economy has been an economy that has been recognised for being an economy of low growth, and that cannot be sustained. We are too reliant upon financial services, and we do need to see the diversification of our economy. And we also need to focus upon intangible service exports, encouraging business with overseas parties. But the third element for me is housing. And we do have a crisis. In fact, the proper terminology is partial market failure. Now, I want to actually come into politics to help people and to home ownership. But not only this, I also want to try and implement policy, both social and economic policy. I think it's absolutely fundamental, and it's something I've been saying for the last 2 years. We need to see a stamp duty surcharge at 3% be introduced. But not only this, we also need to look at Andium Homes market equivalent rate, 80% of the private sector. It's too much. The private sector is currently distorted. We have seen demand pull inflation. Prices are going up and up and up. And for me, the fourth element is really about education. I think we need to be embracing tertiary-based education. We need to be investing in our schools. We need to be investing properly in our schools. But also we need to focus upon the upskilling and reskilling of islanders, because 17,000 jobs will be lost as a result of automation by 2035. Thank you.
Okay, thank you there, Max, for that. 2:25, not bad. So we'll use that as the benchmark for everybody else now, which is fair. Thank you, Max, for your 2.5 minutes. We'll go to Ina next. Ina, your turn to express your wishes and your manifesto pledges.
Thank you, Maria, and hello all business owners, managers, residents of St Helier and the rest of Jersey who join us this morning or watch it later. I'm still the owner of a small business, and I know the complexities of running a business in Jersey firsthand. I see locally owned small and medium businesses as a Jersey's only real protection against the global economic pressures. So how do we nourish our business ecosystem? We do have some control in what's happening in Jersey compared to the global markets, as we just will have a choice to adjust and cope with. We need to constantly improve it of our local business ecosystem to meet our ongoing challenges. A successful business needs to be able to expand and new businesses to be created and operated rapidly. That means that reducing amount of red tape and systematic delay needs to be put in place. We currently have about 800 people actively seeking for work and about 1,300 vacancies, empty business premises, high rents, difficulties with supply chain, and multiple external inflationary pressures. Staff shortage means business will compete for the staff. It means it will put inflationary pressure on the business, which will eventually be passed to us as customers. Follow Brexit and the pandemic, there must be a push for economic recovery. And in this time of uncertainty, everyone needs to be part of our efforts to keep Jersey stable into the future and protect our way of life. We need to work strategically to stabilize and reduce our cost of living, so Jersey family don't feel they must leave the island to afford life elsewhere, and we keep our local talent in Jersey. So we do need full cooperation between the government, business sector, charities, and residents to thrive at the time of hardship. If we'll get it right, our future will be economic growth, increased choice, and a busy town and economic stability. If we'll get it wrong, we'll see fewer and fewer businesses operated in Jersey. So we must get it right to ensure our prosperous future here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ina. And we move on. Just a point, which is a question in there from someone watching, just saying, if I need to ask a question, how? There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and that's where you pop in any questions if you're watching this and you need to ask a question. Let's go round as I'm going around at the moment now in clockwise order. Mary, you'll be next. So Mary on my screen and Mary on everybody else's. It's your 2.5 minutes on your manifesto.
Good morning, all. I'm an independent candidate for St Helier North. My focus remains to serve the parish and islands in a positive and constructive manner, concentrating on delivering results for residents. I believe in equality of treatment and opportunity and importance of diverse perspectives for strong government. Passionate about protection of green spaces and agricultural land, I was delighted that I and other residents successfully saved the fields at the Grand Route to St John for the use of an organic milk producer, and the green field at the Puckalay, ensuring residents still had green space around them. I'm supportive of the financial services and promoting diversification across sectors such as retail, farming, construction and tourism. It is essential to ensure that dependence is spread, providing wider employment opportunities and revenue incomes. I do not support high borrowing and burden created for future generations. I'm an advocate of a full assessment of the island-wide skill gap, support and encourage on-island upskilling and maximum development and utilisation of local skills, from my point, is absolutely essential so that we're able to recruit more local as opposed to having to continue to bring in people from outside of the island. We should be only doing that when it is strictly necessary. So therefore, I do believe that from the point of view of education, we need to ensure that people are given every single opportunity, that they are able to follow the line and path of career that they wish. And of course, have an opportunity like I did to actually be able to diversify. I started off in the tax office, for example, but ended my working life, well, actually back in the Treasury, but I had been a police officer for 25 years. So I do believe that we need to ensure that there is a programme of continual development across people's lives. And to me, that is where Highlands College falls into it. I'm a utilisation of brownfield sites in relation to housing and creating developments where we've got old properties which are underused. And I think that is where we need to be looking to be able to assist us with accommodation. Just to let you know, I'm born and brought up in Jersey. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Mary. We'll come back and pick up some of those points, as we will with each of our candidates in a few minutes. Phil Romero, in my right to left rota that I'm going at the moment, it's your turn. I know you're sharing your screen with the birthday boy next to you, but we'll come to that in a moment. But first of all, Phil, it's for you.
Yeah, I've got my twin standing next to me, so I hope you don't get confused. And well, hello everyone, because this is actually our 4th hustings this week, so we're getting to see each other regularly. So I'm Phil Romero. I was born in Jersey, as you probably guessed from my name. Brought up here in the school system, went away to uni, came back, and have lived here most of my life. I purchased my first business when I was 23, which was a pharmacy business, and I've basically been my own boss and run businesses more or less the whole time since. It's all been in healthcare. So I'm my original business was a pharmacy chain which had some shops in Guernsey as well as Jersey. I did some work with the co-op for a while around their GP practice, which was the first practice to introduce free healthcare for under fives, which was a great success really. I am currently the chairman of Family Nursing and Home Care, which, as you probably well know, is the organisation that provides all of the nursing care in the community from primary pre-birth through to end of life, working with people like hospice and other agencies. My core operation business at the moment is a social enterprise called Call and Check, which spun out of Jersey Post and looks after vulnerable people in our community, addressing loneliness and isolation. So my background's health and well-being, and if elected, it is my intention to get involved with the health team and department and help create a healthcare system which is of good quality, high quality, easily accessible and affordable for all islanders. I also have an interest in education, and as Ina touched on a bit earlier, it is vital for us to develop our own skills. So during this campaign, we've been talking to various areas of our community and business community about how we can do that. The Highlands College facility is somewhat underused and underdeveloped and probably underfunded, in my opinion, and we should be looking at doing some work with that. And then from a commercial point of view in St Helier, which is obviously going to be particular interest to me, I would like to focus on developing the art and culture side, the festival offerings that would support our tourism industry, increasing the amount of green space in the town centre, and particularly around Broad Street. Probably not the most popular, but I would actually want to keep Broad Street closed, maybe introduce some disabled parking into it to enable access, but also to encourage more al fresco dining to take St Helier from a retail base to much more of an entertainment and hospitality based environment.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Phil. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll come back and again pick some of those points out in the conversations we've got coming up. Ted, it's over to you. I'd be very remiss of me not to say happy birthday to start off with. You know, look,
I wish you hadn't reminded me of that.
Looking very young for a 35-year-old. Let's move to your manifesto and indeed your 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Murray. Yes, I've been a member of the state. I was a deputy and then I was a senator, and I know how difficult it is to get things through, which is the reason why I joined a political party, because the Alliance have got 14 people going forward, and if they're elected with the manifesto we have, I believe we can change a lot of things that need changing in Jersey, and I want to be part of that. Basically, the important thing that we must all face is making sure our economy is sound. And that means we must have successful businesses in Jersey. And I congratulate the Chamber for the efforts they make in helping the government understand the problems that they're facing. And I believe it's the job of government to get rid of all those impediments that stop businesses performing well. Now, we're going to face a lot of problems, particularly developing our tourist industry. The awful thing that's going to happen if our industry goes down any further is that we're going to lose a lot of our airlinks. And that's going to affect everybody in Jersey. It's going to particularly affect the ability to attract people to come and work here. And there already are enough impediments to that. And that's something else that we're going to have to face if we get elected in the States and make those decisions. So those are island matters that I would wish to be dealing with. I would also want to deal with a number of problems in St Helier. That's why I went onto the Roads Committee. I was elected to that, and I went on that because I was furious about what was going to happen with a hospital and a new highway. Not so much the hospital, although I think it's in the wrong place, but that debate is over. But about the highway that's going there. And it's something that we didn't want to see, and we can change. And that's something we must do. I'm chairman of the First Tower Community Association. We run a youth club. We've just opened the first dual purpose centre for young people and for elderly people in First Tower, which will be formally opened in about a month's time. It's a fantastic project. We're very proud of it, and I'm proud of being part of that. And I'm also responsible for all the flowers that you see at First Tower, because we had this awful part of our district, which actually is a coverage for the sewerage tanks underneath. And we've turned that into a wonderful garden throughout the year. And I enjoy doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ted. And thank you everyone for giving us your overview of your election, if you like, and your manifesto. Let's pick some of the areas out of that. And again, if there is anybody that has a question, then drop it into the Q&A box. One of the areas that was coming out among the many subjects there, no surprise, the economy, housing and recruitment. And I want to touch on skills first, if I may. And there was talk of, and I think Mary, you mentioned it, of upskilling more and using more local recruitment to fill some of the gaps that we've got. Do you think we've got enough people locally to fill those gaps, or do you because we're at this situation at the moment? There are 1,200, 1,300 job vacancies. There are only 700 people unemployed. So even if everybody who is unemployed was put into a job tomorrow and had the skills to do it, we're still not going to fill those gaps. So how do we square that circle, Mary?
I think the thing is that I fully appreciate what you say, but I do think that we need to actually look at what skills and abilities that local people have, because we've got over 103,000 people. So I do think that we should actually be looking at upskilling people in order that people actually have an opportunity to be able to change their career path. So I do think that that's quite important. I also believe that we seem to be importing quite a lot of high managers. And I do believe that we should be giving opportunities for local residents first. So I do think that that's a thing that we should be doing. I do accept that what you say in relation to job skills and the number of people that are available. However, I do actually think, and this is an opportunity, if you think about what we've done over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of remote working. Now, as an example, I've seen people living in Spain working for the states of Jersey. So actually, is there a way of us being able to have some skills that actually aren't on island living? So there is ways, and I think it needs to be, people need to sit down and actually work out what we can do to ensure that across the board, we give people as much opportunity as we possibly can on island, and that if we are able to employ somebody without them actually being here, then maybe some of those functions, the administrative type functions, the consultants or whatever, can actually be done from not living here. So okay. We could fill some of those gaps.
Okay, I think I'm not going to argue with you because you worked in the tax office, and I never argue with anyone who worked in the tax office. But I think that
was a very long time ago.
there are tax challenges of trying to tax someone who lives in another place. So I think that's a circle that would need to be squared there. Phil, I'm going to come to you next on this in terms of skills. There is no doubt. You mentioned Highlands College as well, and as you put it, the underfunding and underdeveloped Highlands College. Do you think we can get people into the jobs where the gaps are? Because it does seem some of the gaps that we've got within retail, within hospitality, they affect areas within your constituency. Do you think you can get locals to do those jobs, is what I'm asking?
Well, I think what this is about, and it's interesting because when we met the Hospitality Association right in the long ago early days of this campaign, one of the challenges I had for the people I was talking to is what do they actually do alongside Highlands, alongside the school system actually, to to actually plot out and explain what the career path that young people could have as they chose to adopt a career within the Jersey business sector. And because it's particularly lacking, I think, I'll be honest, I think the industries themselves, there's some good parts in it, but really working with our education system, working with particularly even down in primary school age group, where obviously it's a long way away from any workplace, but beginning to start plotting out a kind of journey to a career, so that when people get through to their GCSEs and A levels, if they're not interested in the university route, there's something really exciting and interesting. And then what we need to do is, as a government, actually, is provide a campus which matches that ambition. One of the problems with Highlands is, to be frank, it's a bit ramshackle in areas. You know, the IT department was running out of porta cabins, and you know, what does that really say to people about what you think of their education? It's not positive. So I would be very keen to look at a new campus, which is designed around ambition and aspiration for the youngsters. And also, when we don't have the opportunity to bring research in to the campus and do things which are really quite innovative and could develop an economic base for the island, particularly if we manage to form some kind of informal link with one of the Russell Group universities. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to alternate with some of the questions with Ted and Phil, because they're both representing the same group. So I think it would be, and Ted, we didn't know you were coming today. It was a bit of a surprise to all of us. So I'm trying to play even-handed on that. So thank you for that from Ted and Phil, because they say the same. And we'll go to Ina next. Ina, your thoughts on skills and how we manage the shortage. And we're going to come on to housing and population in a few minutes' time. And I know they're all linked to each other, but there is a skills crisis right now, and there is a real shortage of staff. We're seeing it everywhere, and it's impacting the small businesses.
Thank you, Murray, for the question. And as you mentioned correctly, population, housing, cost of living, shortage of labor, they're all connected. And my answer will be divided into three parts: short term, medium term, and the long term. Because on the short term, we don't have much opportunity. We need to react. We need to find practical short-term solution. But for the long term, we must be proactive and we must plan. The skills demand now will be very different for the skills demand in 10 years' time. And this is where we have start to think strategically, where we would like to find ourselves in 10 years' time. What I mean that if we are going towards the low footprint, high yield economy to deal with the population, with fewer people being more productive. If we are looking into the businesses with new ways of working, modern technologies, we do need to see how we pay more. At the same time, we have less people doing the work. And it's not always possible, but we've seen improvements even in the hospitality, different ways of working that came through the pandemic. Another things which we must do, we must look into more investment and training of the blue collar, what I call in Jersey, into the care, in teaching and profession that we feel that are less valued, undervalued maybe somehow in Jersey. Another point, I met several people on the doors and they felt that they would like to move out of the finance, but they cannot leave the finance industry because it's their income, they pay mortgages, and they feel that we don't have what we call mature person grant. If we would like people to go to other industries which are requiring labor, we have locals who can be retrained and would like to be retrained and to try something different. And the last point on this I will make, and I'm happy to follow with other question. Personally, I would like to see and create a pathway and improve conditions for our university graduates to encourage them to return to the island and be part of our life here and contributing to the economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And lastly, on this little round, Max.
And sorry, the question is?
The question is skills, and how do we upgrade the skills, and is that the answer to plugging the recruitment gap?
Well, I think the government has to rely upon its fiscal policy in the future. Essentially, what we need to be doing is we need to have budgets in place, and we need to be making sure that we are investing in the right areas. Now, when you're looking at digital, for instance, that's really part of the future, digital skills. That's where we are going to see many people who are going to probably be losing their jobs, for instance, in financial services. PwC's report highlighted 8,100 jobs are going to be lost. So we have a problem there where there's structural unemployment. So we need to try and migrate those people into new areas within our economy. One of the downsides is, of course, people will have a level of remuneration, say if it's £35,000 or £40,000 that they're earning, and all of a sudden they're out of work. They have no other alternative to go into. So they're most likely going to have to either take a reduced wage, or they're going to have to try and find alternative means of employment. But also we need to be looking at the high remuneration areas. And again, that is really where technology comes into it. I think there's a couple of other things that we need to be doing. There's a lot of people who are unemployed as well. We need to make sure that we are more stringent in actually trying to get people back to work. I think that's been one of the other issues. And I think as well, there are people domestically who can return to the workplace, but actually they are maybe relatively comfortable. They can maybe do part-time work. They don't have to return full-time to work. So I think we always have to bear in mind, we are also having to rely upon economic migrants, for instance, who come to the island, and are also going to be componential to our economy. And I think this is why we need to actually have a work permit system in place. I'm also an advocate for a points-based immigration system. I think, you know, the more people we have who are economically active and who have the skills who can contribute to our economy, they're the people we really want in the longer term too.
Okay, Max, thank you very much indeed for that. You led us very nicely into where I was going to head next, which is into population and migration. Where we appear to be, we've got a government that's taken 4 years to come up with a policy that we brought in on two wheels at the very end of this last political cycle, which was pretty much a rewrite of the policy that was written 4 years earlier. So we've taken some time to get to this level of, we've now got the basis of a population policy, which is going to be now about data gathering for the next 3 or 4 years, by which time it will have changed again. So what do we do about population? What's the right way forward to this? I'm going to come to Ted Vibert on this one. Ted, our population, no surprise, it's been growing. It didn't grow as much as people thought it was going to grow because of the issues of the last couple of years, Brexit and COVID. But how do we manage our population? Because we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You don't want it to fall, but you don't want it to rise too much.
Right. You weren't right about the reason the population didn't grow. We introduced, or the states introduced, a housing policy that has actually restricted a certain group of people coming into Jersey as a result of that policy. But the crucial fact is that controlling a population is extremely difficult and dangerous. If you do it the wrong way, it can have devastating effects on employment and on the way of life in that particular area. Guernsey's already seeing it. They've got a tougher housing policy, and they're even more desperate for staff for the various functions. And we are seeing it in Jersey now. And the difficulty is finding the balance. And I believe the Australian system is the right way. What they now do is they go to all the employing organisations, such as the Chamber of Commerce, and they say to them, you give us a list of the essentially people we need to run your section of the business. In other words, if you're a hotel, if you're a building contractors, you give us a list of the kind of skills you're going to need. And if the people applying for migration to Australia don't fit that bill, they simply don't come in. It's called a skills presentation, and I think it's absolutely right for Jersey, but it has to be done very delicately, and it has to be done in consultation with the businesses in Jersey, because unless we do it properly, it could be disastrous. We have to be very, very careful.
Okay. Managing population, Mary, a very dangerous and difficult thing to do. You've been part of the States Assembly, so have experienced that discussion over the last 4 years. What do you, what's your perfect solution going forward? You're on mute there, Mary, by the way, sorry.
I put myself mute because somebody came in whilst we were doing this, so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't heard. I think the thing is that we need to be able to ask industries who they actually need and how many staff they need. And it may very well be that we need to look at trimming things down. And so I suppose the point is that, for example, there will be systems that will be starting to automate. And I know that, as an example, the agricultural industry is starting to look at different ways of doing things. And I assume that within hospitality, it's not an area that I know sort of particularly well, but I think it's a way that we need to just see how we can maybe do things in a different way. I think in relation to the population, we, as Ted said, we do need to be careful that we don't end up in a situation where we lose businesses, because that's the last thing that we would want to do, because if we lose businesses, then obviously we're going to lose our economy. So we do need to ensure that that's the case. But I think it is about working out exactly what and who we need, and ensuring that we don't bring in people for jobs which we actually could find locally. And I know we said I think we've only got 700 people or so, but we need to find out who those 700 people are and what sort of employment that they could take. So if we, hypothetically, if we need, as you said, say 1,200 people, there's 1,200 vacancies and we've got 700 people, then what are those 700 people's skills and abilities? What are their aspirations? What kind of industry would they like to go into? And what can we do to assist that? So we should end up in a position effectively that we have very or little no unemployment, as we have done for many, many years. Let's be fair, for many, many years, we had virtually no unemployment. So we need to try and get back to that so that we're only bringing in those skills that we actually desperately need. And we do have to have a system whereby, we only allow people in with the skills that we lack, not generic across the board, I believe.
Okay, Mary, thank you. Ina, it's your turn on this subject, and just picking off you probably got your own answers, but just picking off what Mary said there. Those people who are unemployed at the moment, there will be some of those people who are very desperate to get back to work, and there may well be some of those who are not quite as desperate to get back to work. So so I think that's a really difficult conundrum to solve, but maybe that's not the question for right now. But just in terms of getting the population managed and managing it properly, how do we do this going forward? Because I think we're in a little bit of no man's land at the moment. We have a tentative policy which is all about data gathering.
I cannot agree with you more, Maury, that we are in no man's land and data gathering. And we, Mary, Steve, myself, during this term, raised not once that we need to get the data in place to make decisions. And we've been promised to receive the data to make the decision, and we didn't have it. And this is why we found ourselves in no man's land. We do have policies, but we don't have population strategy, which is long overdue. And the population strategy can be made based on the data that finally the census results were released. Even a year later, I'm sure that they'll be different now, but it is something. And as Ted said, we do need data from businesses to create a population strategy that finds this balance between our need for skills and labor and our need to protect our natural resources and the place. It is a very fine balance. Now, if we are going back to skills, it was very I had a conversation during the hospitality Hustings, and I asked, how many chefs do you need? How many chefs do we need now on the island? And it wasn't, oh, we don't know, but maybe next year we'll have more. But again, if we need more next year, as a government, we need to understand what we need. We need to work actually together with the businesses to be prepared to provide, to work together where people will live, where children will go to school, and others. And again, if we need, I'm just dropping a number, X amount of chefs today, how we make sure that in 5 years' time, we do have locals or trained for chefs. We encourage, we'll go to the schools, we try to connect them to create interest to, there is an attraction in a chef. My brother is the pastry chef, and after university, he decided to do this. So it's not it's about how we communicate this and how we plan in advance. And another thing, and because I'm looking to the fairer society, I feel that the small businesses, lots of time are overlooked. So the big business, it's easier for big business to get licenses, but I can hear from small businesses in all sectors that it's a struggle. And I'm not sure if it's struggle just because it's they receive less, or also because they actually don't have a champion, a connection, the way how they can apply and the process that they need to go, because they actually doing, you know, lots of self-employed business of 2 or 3 people, they day-to-day engage in delivering the work. So they don't have enough time for the paperwork. And I think we need to look how we also support small businesses in the short term to get the skills that they need.
I was just speaking on behalf of the Chamber. You know, we do get a lot of small businesses, and their first question is, how do I apply for an entitled to work, a register? Don't even know how, let alone the fact that the local business, the small business, is probably doing a 15-hour day because they haven't got any staff in the first place. So you've got that issue there. I think, Ted, you raised a hand there. Am I right in thinking that you did? Yes,
it was me, but
Phil.
It was me, and but if Max goes first, Murray, because I'm just kind of got to just point to add rather than a point to a larger point.
Max, did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, I think actually it's first of all, it's quite important to realise Jersey has a dependency ratio that's also increasing, 52%. Now we need people to be economically active who are essentially going to fill the pot. In future, we will have a higher healthcare expenditure. I think that is very much inevitable. Now, I think in terms of local businesses, it's important that we look at focusing on finding local labour first. If the case is there's nobody available, then that's when we need to be looking at bringing people in. Now, I think essentially when you're looking at, say, the Chamber of Commerce and the number of businesses that you have, work permits is essentially what we need to be looking at. I think as well, we also have to have an understanding in terms of the island's infrastructure. And I think this is why it's very important that the government is essentially very much embracing a stakeholder relationship with the private sector. And this is why you have to be working with industry leaders. For instance, we could be looking at one company and they might be 15 people short. So that's something that, again, would have to be part of a feasibility plan. But also it's looking both short, medium term, but also longer term as well. And I do think a points-based immigration system is going to be very crucial because, again, we are looking at Jersey's housing market. And I think for anybody who's looking to come to Jersey, it's too expensive, especially as well when you're looking at the private rental sector. There are some people who've taken out mortgages, buy-to-let mortgages. They have to make sure that they cover those rates and also the interest as well. So again, if people do come to Jersey, there is, of course, issues in terms of they will have most of their earnings probably be very much disproportionate, taken away due to the rent. So I think that there's a compromise that's really needed across the board there.
Okay, thank you, Max. And Phil, yeah, there was a hand raised, so you come in there.
Thank you, Murray. My point, and Max has touched on it actually, is, you know, there's a quite sizable element of population growth which is completely out of our control actually. And due to the success of the healthcare system globally, etc., we're all living longer. And so what we've currently got here, and this is one of the biggest drivers to our population growth, is we've got more people being born and less people dying. And it's just a fact of society. It's much wider than just Jersey. And it's creating this demographic shift. Matt's just referred to the dependency ratio. You know, we're around about right at the moment, but 20 years down the line, we're not in a good place if we don't have population growth. So we're going to have to do population growth, even just for helping look after ourselves as we get older and making sure the services are around the needed. So we need a managed system. And I think that's the kind of reality that I would just wanted to pick up. We're kind of a victim of our own success to some extent.
Okay. One of the big issues of recruiting and one of the big issues of population is managing housing. They are all linked to each other. One creates the other solution and problem. So in terms of housing and looking at St Helier North in particular, that will be feeling the pinch as much as any district that I can think of. So housing crisis, I think pretty much everyone has now agreed we have one, although there was some early denials from some politicians at one time. So we're in a housing crisis. How do we solve this housing crisis, or are we already getting to the solution of it? Because everybody wants more houses, but they don't want them in their district. So over to you, candidates. How do you solve it in your district? Who am I going to go to first on this one? I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, but I'm going to Ina. Oh, Ted, go on then. Ted, you've raised your hand. We'll go to you.
Yes, I've written a great deal about this because I really do get cross with people who say we need more houses, and as soon as you say, well, we're going to have to build it on a few of your fields, all hell breaks loose, and the parish assembly gets full of people protesting. And it just doesn't happen in Grooville, it happens throughout the whole of the parishes. The situation is that young people do want to have a decent home, and I believe that it is the biggest problem facing Jersey. And I mean the biggest problem, because it affects everything. It affects everybody's attitude, it affects everybody's family life, and it has to be solved. The only way it'll get solved is the new states of Jersey declaring it an emergency on the same basis as we did the pandemic. Now, I attended a breakfast of the construction and engineering division. I think you were there, Murray, a couple of days ago. And at that, it was made very clear that there were a lot of impediments in planning and in all sorts of restrictions that made it very, very difficult for the building industry to do what they want to do, which is essentially to build homes. And what they want is a clear path. And they suggested that we adopted the same attitude that was adopted when they were building the Nightingale Hospital. And the guy who was responsible for that said that in one day, they made more decisions than were made in 3 months. And it was because they put their minds to it and they got everybody together. And that's what I'm going to be committed to do if I'm elected to get in the States, because I regard it as the #1 emergency for the time.
Okay, just the idea of 3 months decision making in one day, that would be a kind of states assembly that would be interesting to watch. Right, let's
You're quite right. Yeah.
Revolutionary, yeah.
You were there, Murray.
Oh boy, I'm not now. Max, let's talk housing here. How do we solve this housing crisis? Because we've only got 9 miles by 5. Really difficult. Do we build up or do we build out?
Well, I'm a firm believer that we do need to start building up. You know, we need to ensure that, you know, with land availability, we can repurpose land, especially in suburban areas. I've also mentioned in my manifesto that, you know, suburban sprawl is a major issue. And that's something that, of course, all the 4 deputies are going to have to try and again probably remove more sites that have been selected in the next term. I think there are a number of factors here. So at the moment, I am in fear that we are most likely going to go into a period of negative equity. House prices have gone up and up. I don't think this is sustainable. And I think, again, you're probably going to see with banks as well, they're probably going to refrain from lending. And I think that's probably going to be quite imminent, potentially. I've outlaid in my manifesto, I would be supporting first-time buyers, and I've also sourced where the funds are coming from. So market value is over 2.5 million. Parties will be paying stamp duty. That stamp duty will be ring-fenced into a fund, provide shared equity loans between 5 to 20% of the market value for a first-time buyer. And also as well, I think it's been very disappointing when you're looking at the ministerial government that we've just had. I know obviously Susie Pinnell said that she opposed the fact that we are in a housing crisis, but we do need to see economic policy be implemented with a stamp duty surcharge at 3%. We need to try and constrain demand. It's a demand that's actually causing demand pull inflation in the prices. And also as well, when we're looking at Andium homes, we need to ensure that the market equivalent rate is reduced. I think that's absolutely essential. And one of the other things as well is when you're looking at the conditions of housing in the private sector, especially when I've been canvassing, it's very important for me that we do introduce dwelling regulation as well. I think that's probably one of the other factors that's probably neglected quite often, but I think people deserve a place where they can actually live.
Okay, Max, thank you very much for that. It was me that asked the question to the Treasury Minister at a chamber lunch that caused that headline. So I do feel a little bit responsible, somewhat. Ina, to you next. Housing crisis and solving it.
Housing crisis, it's big and not easy questions to answer. We all recognize how difficult for young families, and not only young families, to get on the property ladder. I will start that I think we had enough reviews. We have enough recommendation. Even as a member of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, I was involved in the recent review of affordable housing. So the recommendations and ways are there. We are talking about right sizing, when the people can go to smaller houses, but it needs to be created maybe as a retirement village with nice spaces, with nice community, that it will not be just small flats, that people don't want to move from big house into the small flats. They would like to downsize into the nice environment. It's building on the brownfield sites. It supports first-time buyers with the deposit, because currently a rent almost equal for a mortgage in St Helier. We know that more than mortgage, it's the problem to get a deposit. And building using the old houses. We have 4,000 empty properties, and some of them empty because they're property rich but cash poor, and it's difficult to restore. Embracing new technology 100%. It's the modular housing can decrease the cost of the house. It's now time to act. We know the solution. It's not one solution. It's small steps in every direction. Another point, it's about the planning and how we work together with the developers. And I had not far from me farm that were not occupied for years and years. It looks like a ghost house, completely derelict. And the developer trying to bring it back. And it's really, really difficult. It would create some accommodations. And we have lots of derelict, actually in our district, in the rural areas. I saw several houses completely empty and nothing happening. And it can bring housing to the market. And my last point, that I think residents, government, councillors, property developments have to sit together and to develop plans for future affordable housing. And why I'm talking, when we had the meeting with the construction industry, it was really clear that we don't have a champion, a board, a lead to work with them. They received different messages from the infrastructure department, planning department, housing department, and this is about us also as a government work together through one route with the industry to improve housing stock.
Okay, Mary, we haven't come to you yet, I don't think. Or did we?
No, there's obviously a lot being said by everybody, but just for something different, I was on, or have been for the last 12 months, on the planning committee, and I was the only one that voted in favour of the development at South Hill, for example. The others voted against because they felt that it was too big. Now, I just obviously disagreed with that, and the recommendation from the planning department was to actually go ahead with it. There was another site in another location, again, where myself and a colleague were the only ones that actually supported it. And this is where sometimes it can be quite difficult, because what you and I perceive to be okay, someone else doesn't. And so I think the thing is, it's the other thing that I've identified is that people talk a lot about planning, but the planning is very short of planners, and the planners are migrating into the private industry. And I believe some of the private industry are migrating back. So I think the thing is, it's a bit of a challenge. And it may be, this is going to be very radical what I'm going to say here, it may be that actually as an island, we need to say, right, we have a problem, we have a shortage of planners. Actually, can we work with the opposition, if you like, so work with some planning companies to get assistance to be able to work on some projects together? And I don't know how radical that is, but actually, you see, you've got very experienced planners who work in private enterprises. So when we go to a planning hearing, for example, we have the planner on this side saying yes or, well, no, usually. So that's why somebody comes along with their planner from a private company who says, well, I disagree with your policies on this. And so this is where then the planning committee then sits and makes a decision. But of course, it's quite often subjective, the decisions that we make, because we've got one side saying yes, one side saying no. So I think whilst we're in this flux, if you like, of chaos, why not try and work a little bit more together to try and resolve some of these problems? And so that may be something that we could actually do in order to get something moving forward. But my final point would be this as well. We need to, the environment needs to have a look at some of the properties that are derelict, because there is challenges, because a lot of them are old properties sitting alongside heritage. Now, we need to and want to preserve some of our heritage sites, but we may need to actually try and see how we can do things so that they are more affordable to bring back online, because that quite often is the problem. Around the island, you will have properties where people haven't brought them back up to be lived in because there's no water, there's no mains drains, and the cost of getting infrastructure onto some of these sites is so excessive, it's not a possibility. So I think we need to, as an island, actually all get together, see what we can actually do to bring this forward.
Okay, Mary, thank you very much.
I seem to have stunned you into silence.
That was thank you, Mary, and thank you, the States Wi-Fi, which is as good as it ever was. There was a hand raised from Ted or Phil. You'll note I actually limit your time because you double as one spokesperson for two people sitting there. So I'm trying to be fair as I can. So a comment coming in from you guys there. I'll come back to you, Mary, in just a second.
So my thoughts on, and I just wanted to express my thoughts on. Sometimes I think the perception that build out on the green spaces out in the country or build high, and then you solve your housing problem. And the problem is, I think what we need to do is a bit clever around how we build, because some people don't want to live in St Helier. They don't want to live in high-rise flats, and actually we've got to find a way of enabling countryside living for people who want to aspire to that. We've all got different desires. So one of the things I'd like to see happen in this next 4 years is that the constables retain their place in chamber as voting members, and some responsibility should come with that. And I'd take the example of St John and Andy Jones driving through the new set of houses that have been planned for a long time and weren't getting anywhere, and he's taken that on board, and I believe that the build has started now. And actually, but maybe some emphasis should be put on the constables, on their vote, linked with their voting rights within the states, for the benefit of the whole island, to actually develop things for their parishioners which solve some of their housing problems. And it could be that some of the housing is not first-time buyers. It could be to enable people to downsize, to free up the houses they're living in, because there's some big houses in the countryside, as we know, which would help the family side of things. And then, so that's one idea. The other idea is building high. I'm actually a fan of building high. You walk around some of the cities in Europe and it's fantastic. But I think that type of thing needs to be part of a wider plan about repurposing and re-energising St Helier, which is what I would like to get involved in as a deputy in St Helier. The retail industry in Jersey is what it is. It's going to continue to be a vital part of our community. However, it does have the challenges from online buying. I know I've got 2 teenagers now, and they don't buy anything in shops. They buy everything online, and that's the future shopper. So the retail market needs to understand that. And actually, if we get ahead of the game here, we can start designing and planning St Helier around making it a destination environment where people live, and then there's lots of facilities around, and we can start setting festivals up and really make it a very interesting place to come to. And I think that would be quite a good way of developing the economy of the parish.
Right, thank you, Phil. Ina had a hand raised, and I think Mary wanted to say something as well. Mary, am I right that you wanted to come back in with something?
No, actually, what I wanted to ask was, you seem to say that you didn't get what I said last time, and then I've not heard what Phil was saying. So I've clearly got some issues here.
All right. Well, we'll try and solve the state's Wi-Fi technology as best we can. But that's probably beyond us. But thank you for that, Ina. Back to you very quickly.
Yeah, and just prompted by Phil comment, because I think it's really important. It's about the design, and there are some places in St Helier that could be built higher. It's like Westmount Apartments, nobody see it. And what's really important that we start to look into the flats and the apartments as also a great place to live, and to make it it's bigger bedrooms, it's bigger balconies, it's communal space outside where people connected and not disconnected. And it's really important to start to move and to have these conversations.
Okay, thank you. Businesses will be watching this. This is the Jersey Chamber of Commerce, Hustings. And I just wonder, and I think, Max, you alluded to this at the start with new economy, but also we've heard about red tape and cost of business and the pressures that businesses are under. So in the remaining 15 minutes, perhaps we can just explore how you as candidates would propose that we help businesses in Jersey, and presumably businesses local to your constituency as well, and to the voters that you've got, because they all shop and they all spend money with businesses locally. So how do we help businesses locally? Max, I'm going to come back to you first on this. How do we make life a little bit easier for the business, the economy driver of our island?
Well, I think first of all, when we're looking at the high streets, it needs to modernise. It needs to move with the times. And I think actually you're seeing with the high street as well, it's losing out to huge monopolists such as Amazon. And that is the reality. They have a huge monopoly. And actually, when you speak to most people, they will tell you that they shop on Amazon instead of going into town. I think you look at places like Santander, where Ted and Phil are sat right now. Okay, that's such a good site, because actually you can act as local consumerism. And also, when people, for instance, are on their lunch hour, they go out and they maybe go into the local shops and they spend. And that's how we need to be, I think, working towards. It needs to be more accessible, the town. I think in terms of the parking, that's also been something that's mentioned with a few of the constituents that I have. And I think, second of all, we need to make use of tangible public capital. So the government's infrastructure, it's been neglected hugely. Why don't we look at how we can actually try and provide some investment and to provide actually for businesses tangible public capital where they can actually work from, and where the rents can be agreeable, but also potentially below market rates as well. But again, it really just depends on how much it's going to cost in terms of the renovation. But I know Councillor Morell spoke about it, and it's something that I also support as well. I think it's absolutely fundamental.
Okay, thank you for that. Phil, you've been in business, you've run businesses locally. I think most of us here have run a business one time or another, or been involved in them. The cost of business and the cost of doing business actually sometimes is not the pounds, but the time you've got to spend jumping through all the hoops. Every business is a tax collector. Every business is a social security collector. This is all time and money they have to spend instead of doing what they set out to do in the first place. So how do we make it easier for businesses to play their part in the economy?
Well, I mean, there's a number of things. The first thing is staff, and I know we've touched on it, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but for our businesses to function, and particularly small businesses, as the ones I had, you know, it's very labour intensive for the business owner, and the broad set of skills you need to have really at your fingertips, i.e. you, it does probably mean that it impacts on how effective the business can be, and there are probably missed opportunities in there. So I mean, I've done, you know, a little bit of work with Jersey Business. There's some I think they're pretty good actually. I would like to see a much and Digital Jersey as well, although I've never really developed what I plan to do in that point, and so there's some lessons to be learned with that. I think there are different facilities that the government can set up to support, but I think there's an onus on the businesses, and you know, when you live in the commercial world, you take your responsibilities on relying on government to keep doing things for you. I think is not the right way to think if you're going to be in the commercial business and be responsible for what you're doing, because that's why I did it. I mean, I didn't want to be dependent on anyone. I wanted to run things for myself. However, that doesn't set aside that there are some facilities that the government could set up. I think Business Jersey and Jersey Business and Digital Jersey are good ideas, and maybe some extension into helping with some of the regulation that came in over the last few years. Some of it probably the right. There's definitely regulation needed at levels, but some of it seems to be a bit onerous, and I can particularly reference that through to the impact the charity law had on the charities and the healthcare, who frankly weren't considered and certainly weren't consulted, despite what people would tell you, around the introduction of charity law. It is ridiculous, because that law was obviously designed, and quite apparently designed, to protect the reputation of the finance industry. So, but that had huge impact, particularly in the care industry, because that's what I know. So maybe more consultation, more communication would have benefited.
Okay, all right. In a small businesses, right up your street here, you'll have seen firsthand the issues that they all have. What can you, as a politician, as a candidate in the election going forward, do to make it easier for businesses?
As you rightly mentioned, Maury, I have operated small businesses, created business, closed business. I'm still operating a small business, so I have experienced the frustration of dealing with the departments that administer the licenses, the co-funding, permissions, and everything that need to be set up and run business. And we worked together more during the pandemic. If you remember, when the hairdressers and beauticians, I got a telephone call on Saturday from the lady saying we were missed from the co-funding, and it's all gone very quickly. And within 6 months, we worked together with you, we worked with Jersey Business, also Beverly set separate group, and we brought it together for you to represent. But the pandemic really raised very quickly that we don't have established route for and communication. So some going through the Chamber of Commerce, but some still don't connect to the Chamber of Commerce. We have Jersey Business, but not all small businesses know about Jersey Business. And it's not surprised that now we are having the high amount of small businesses need to refund overpayments because they didn't submit correctly, they didn't understand whatever happened. So for me, I would like to champion and to create an established route, a space for small businesses to have stream communication, for government to understand what are the challenges of small businesses, because they are core of our economy, for government to find as quick as possible, coordinate and find the practical solutions for the issues. Another thing that was raised with me for the small businesses, especially trade businesses, is to find light side industrial areas. We have offices, but to find the workshops that will be for affordable rent price, what we call light industrial areas, is a challenge. And I would like to look into this as well, and to create more industrial areas. Like one of them I supported during the Bridge and Island Plan debate in St Lawrence, but we need to see more to allow businesses to operate in the premises for affordable price.
Okay, thank you, Ina. Mary, I want to make sure that we get to you, otherwise we'll be running foul of our equitable time. So Mary, help for small businesses. They're the start of the economy. How do we help them?
I think first and foremost, I think by the sounds of it, and it's not an area that I'm necessarily, although I come from a farming family, which was a fairly small business, but I think by the sound of it, what we need to do is probably create almost like a little hub, so that if you want to start a new business, you go to a dedicated hub, which has got all of the necessary documentation, what you need to do, how you can get staff if your business, you're not able to recruit locally, etc., etc. But also, what I'd like, I was quite disappointed that the Assembly voted to continue the relinquishing of the licence for the hemp farm, because to be honest, I visited the business the other day, and there was the idea that that business could go somewhere else. I'm not so sure, because having looked at it, it is quite a significant size of business, and I can fully appreciate that. I live it, we are working for St Helier North, and there's been agreement to create a park there. But what I would like to do is actually ask the questions about, can we actually do both things? Because I think the hemp thing is a very good business where they've spent a lot of time diversifying, and their opportunity, from my perspective, isn't going to be able to be managed in any other way. So for me, I would like to see how, as a government, we're going to help small businesses to ensure that we don't lose them, because I think that's one that we could potentially lose if we're not careful.
All right, we are running out of time, but there is a hand raised there, and I'm going to go to it very, very quickly. Was that you, Ted?
Yes, I'm going to be very quick, Murray. I know that the Chamber of Commerce and the other organisations working with small businesses have been in consultation with the states, but there's more to consulting. You have to listen, and not only have you got to listen, you have to act. And there are two examples that have happened in recent years. Has been the cost of putting the price of alcohol up without consulting the industry has dramatically impacted on the hospitality industry, and it was done for health reasons. They didn't consult the industry and tell them what impact that was going to make. So that's the sort of thing that happens with the states, that they talk to the industry, but they don't really listen. And somebody said to me, who owned a small business, talking to the states now is like having a dialogue with a deaf, and that's got to change.
All right, we're almost out of time. I'm going to go around with a couple of yes nos to see some yes nos from you, because I won't have time for explanations on these. So the first one is GST. Do we remove GST from food? Yes or no? Hot topic at the moment. Max, GST off food? Yes. Or on? Yes, remove it off food. Okay, Ina, do we remove it off food?
Depends on which food. Yes, but depends on what and how we compensate for this.
Okay, fine. Phil and Ted.
Phil and Ted's excellent adventure. A definitive no. Do not take it off. We use other methods which are more flexible and effective to support low-income families in this area. And that was a
Mary,
yes.
GST on food
will hand a big handout to wealthy people. It's a ridiculous idea.
All right.
Yes, but only on essential foods, not on luxury.
Interesting. Next, yes or no. Does Jersey need a university? Yes or no? Ina?
Yes.
Yes. Mary?
Absolutely yes.
And Max, sorry.
Yes.
Without a doubt. Yes. Phil and Ted?
I'd like to see a study done on it first.
I'd like to see university, but I'm not too sure Jersey's got the capacity. So a partnership with a Russell Group university would be ideal.
All right, excellent. We've done our yes and no's. We've had some very interesting conversation today. I'm extremely grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed for that. I wish you and the other candidates that couldn't make this today from your constituency the very best with the remaining time you have left. I've lost count at what day we're at and what days we've got to go, but I think you've got 12 days and counting, including today, to election. So that's 12 days left for canvassing. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Murray.
Bye.
Bye bye.